WWDC just happened, and every iPad Pro user who had just bought the new M1 iPad Pro a month earlier had left the event extremely disappointed and confused. But tablets have always been in a very weird spot. After so many years of trying to put a touchscreen on a large handheld device and failing, has left the tablet industry to be a very confusing segment. That is, until Steve Jobs unveiled the original iPad in 2010. And for almost a decade now, the tablet industry made sense, but things have changed. Again. And once again, the tablet industry is confused. Before we can begin discussing the confusion today, we actually have to go back a bit, back to the first attempts to make a tablet. The original concept was to put a touchscreen on a device that you could hold in your hand, or in some cases your arm. And while they did manage to achieve the specific form factor, it also came with many drawbacks. Hey, kind of like foldables. All of these problems were effects from one question. How do we use it? They figured that since Windows was a capable operating system, why not use it? After all, it might help advertise these tablets and show that they are just as capable as a laptop. Except it wasn't. While yes, Windows is very capable of doing many things, Windows also requires powerful hardware to show off that capability. And due to the limitations of the hardware due to the form factor, Windows did not perform very well. The hardware problems consisted of low-end specs, poor cooling, and even the thinnest and lightest tablets were still about as massive as a laptop anyways. Windows also led to compromises of needing a stylus since our fingers are too fat to select anything specific. Overall, the user experience was so poor that these original tablets didn't see great sales and was left in a confusing state of why. And we call it the iPad. Ever since the tablet was first introduced, it has gone through an identity crisis. And while hope was being given up on the tablet, Steve Jobs was already working on solidifying the tablet's identity. The project was actually being worked on around the same time as the iPhone, but we all know which project Apple decided to reveal first in 2007. But little did anyone know that the iPhone would influence the solution to the problem that has plagued the tablet since conception. And on January 27th, 2010, Steve Jobs walked up on stage and introduced the first iPad into the world. Yes, this is the OG iPad. At first, the market was confused as to why the iPad basically ran the same operating system as the iPhone, but without the phone app. It got a lot of backlash and was accused of being basically an oversized iPod Touch. But after Apple had already fixed the portable music player industry with the iPod and completely fixed the smartphone with the iPhone, everyone decided to give the iPad a try, thinking, maybe Apple just fixed the tablet industry. And those theories were right. iPads were flying off the shelves, left and right. The negative reviews quickly changed to positive excitement. After Apple solved the tablet identity problem, others were quickly trying to rush their Android versions of the iPad. Although Google never really optimized Android to run on a tablet, so those never really sold exactly like the iPad. So, everyone lived happily ever after, right? Not exactly. It's currently 2021, and we should know by now that the iPad has come a long way. There are a total of 4 different versions of the iPad that the tech community refers to as the budget iPad, the iPad mini, the iPad Air, and most importantly, the iPad Pro. While the first 3 that I mentioned may still be suiting the market as intended, it's the iPad Pro that hasn't really been staying with the rest of the herd. While the first 2 versions of the iPad Pro were still fitting into the same market with better specs, making it a great gaming device, it is nowhere near that today. It all really started with the 3rd gen iPad Pro at the beginning of 2018, after the iPad Pro got such an iPhone X-like redesign plus a new A12X processor that at the time was competing with Intel's Core i9 desktop processor, it began to challenge the user's perception of what the iPad can do. A few years back, Microsoft was mad at the tablet industry, no longer wanting to use Windows as the operating system in favor of iOS. Microsoft set their determination to figure out where they screwed up with their OS so they could get it to run on a tablet again. Maybe that's why Windows 10 really sucks today. After Microsoft introduced the Surface line, people once again began changing their perception of what a tablet can do. The funny thing about this is none of us has really noticed it, but once again, for a few years now, the tablet's going through yet another identity crisis. Microsoft was pitching the Surface line as a laptop replacement, while Apple was still pushing the iPad as a media consumption device. You should have guessed by now that these are two very different philosophies. And these philosophies are being fought over constantly, disrupting the perception of a tablet yet again. But as of recently, everyone has been wondering when the iPad would be a laptop replacement like the Surface. How the heck did we get to this point? It all started with the comparison of the A12X and other laptops. Because of the power of the A12X competing with high-end laptops, it left an impression that it was trying to compete with them. That's when the thought of the iPad replacing a laptop arose. But for the most part, the idea was shut down by iOS 12 not having many laptop features like mouse support and keyboard shortcuts. Then, despite we thought they would never do it, Apple brought mouse support midway through iPadOS 13, allowing the iPad Pro to offer a laptop-like experience to what people perceived to replace the laptop. Then the idea of the iPad Pro replacing a laptop was solidified when Apple put the M1 processor that to this point was used exclusively in desktop macOS products. Now that iPad Pro users thought that this M1 iPad was going to replace the laptop, they noticed more flaws that just didn't allow it to. And with WWDC around the corner, everyone thought that Apple had something really big planned for the iPad Pro. After all, why would they put a desktop class chip in the iPad Pro in the first place? WWDC happened. And while Craig talked about iPadOS 15, none of the limitations were even brought up. It broke everyone's heart that the iPad Pro still has this amazing hardware, but can't have it taken advantage of. Now it has left everyone confused as to what the iPad Pro was even meant to be. Here's my theory. When Microsoft made the Surface, little did they know that there really was no difference between that and a regular laptop. The only thing different is that they shoved all the hardware behind the screen rather than under the keyboard. Something that I've noticed is that every Surface I see, they all have the keyboard attached to it, effectively keeping it still in the form of a laptop. So while yes, Microsoft did manage to get the hardware behind the screen, so few people bought that device without the keyboard and used the device like an actual tablet. I find it hilarious when Microsoft did their ad campaign against the iPad Pro, they talked about how the iPad was only a tablet. Gee, I think maybe that's because it is a tablet? While the Surface was a tablet and a full computer. To be honest, it was pretty bad at being both. So, when people thought the iPad was supposed to compete with the Surface, to be honest, they weren't really competing at all since nobody really uses the Surface without the keyboard attached, while people do use the iPad without the keyboard. They don't compete because the Surface practically failed to be a tablet in the first place. So if the Surface never really was an example of a pro tablet, then what really is a pro tablet? A tablet is a larger device that you can still hold in your hand, but have a more extended view of your content. I don't know if you're aware of this, but tablets have already nailed the lifestyle market in the home and in schools, primarily because of their portability and primary use case of being a content consumption device. But we know, especially with the hardware Apple has put into the iPad Pro, that the iPad Pro was made to do more than just consume content. The use cases I can see the iPad Pro fit in may not completely take full advantage of the hardware, but it does take some advantage of it. I'll first point out the obvious one, professional artists. I fully believe photo editing is truly done best on a tablet, with a combination of ProMotion display, an Apple Pencil, potentially a non-sponsored paper-like screen protector, and Adobe's Photoshop, and more, the experience of editing pictures is far superior than the imperfect direction of mouse movement. Not to mention, the Apple Pencil is capable of adjusting thickness and shade, while in order to do that with a mouse, you have to change tools. And when doing some things like Photoshop, you can take advantage of the M1 during the machine learning and enhancement, as well as the final export. Other use cases include 3D modeling and graphic design, things that actually take advantage of having a touchscreen in the first place. I hate using CAD on a desktop because it's so difficult and confusing to pan to the angle that I want to see. Not even a laptop trackpad is the best solution to this problem. But because of the M1, the iPad Pro is now capable of so much more. Why won't Apple let us use the iPad Pro to replace our laptop? After all, Apple themselves made some ads pitching the iPad Pro as a laptop replacement. However, I don't think most people understand what Apple means by a laptop replacement. What Apple is trying to promote is ditching the laptop form factor in favor of the tablet form. What most people took away from Apple's ad campaign is they can basically turn the iPad Pro into a laptop form. Somehow, they don't understand Apple is suggesting the idea of using a tablet, like a tablet, as your personal computer. They don't realize that Apple is looking to change, yet again, the way we use tech. Apple has already changed the way we listen to music with the iPod. They changed a huge number of ways we use our phones with the iPhone. And once again, Apple is changing the way we use our portable devices. Their definition of a laptop replacement isn't really stick a keyboard and a trackpad on a tablet and boom, laptop. That just sounds like a janky setup. Apple's looking to pitch the idea of ditching the form factor altogether. This is where we have a giant disconnect from Apple. We all figured out at this point that both Apple and us are not on the same page. All we can really do at this point is speculate and come up with theories like I am in this video. And before you angrily comment, if it's not supposed to take the form of a physical laptop, then why did Apple give us the Magic Keyboard in the first place? I don't know. When Apple came out with the Magic Keyboard case, I was very confused about this decision. Yet, the cursor may be more optimized for mobile compared to your standard precision cursor, but after seeing update after update, as well as trying out the mouse itself, yes, I managed to get my hands on an iPad and try out the mouse itself. To be honest, it's not really that big of a deal. It's not really that important. And seeing update after update from 13. Whenever mouse support came out to 15 today, it's becoming clearer that the cursor isn't important to the iPadOS experience as much as we all thought. Does this mean the iPad Pro is perfect the way it is? Of course not. ProRes, a video codec developed by Apple themselves, ironically, is completely unrecognized by the iPad. External drive support is still iffy. Some drives work, some flat out don't. Multitasking, though it may be more simplified in iPadOS 15, thank you, is still more confusing than a desktop OS. And don't even bother asking me why apps are still limited to 5 gigs of RAM. There are some things that I do agree with the iPad Pro community on. And if the issues I just named would be addressed, I think that would make it an even better tablet versus everyone else thinking it's a better laptop contender. But it looks like we may have to wait until iPadOS 16 on this one. I know and understand why a lot of people are mad about the iPadOS updates featured at WWDC this year. I do understand how truly amazing the hardware on the iPad Pro is and how powerful the M1 chip really is. And I get how expensive of an investment the iPad Pro can get, and because they are so expensive, you want to maximize the value of these things. However, while a Swiss Army knife may be able to do many things, it will not replace my dedicated screwdriver set. And while yes, you could consider the iPad Pro to be a Swiss Army knife of so many things, that doesn't mean it's going to be a dedicated product in all of those things. My Swiss Army knife may be able to have a screwdriver on it, but it's not as good as a dedicated one, I can guarantee you that. While thanks to the M1 and the Magic Keyboard allowing the iPad Pro to be able to handle these intensive tasks, at the end of the day, the iPad Pro is still a tablet. I am actually looking to purchase a 12.9-inch iPad Pro for work myself, but because I don't use a tablet for my work that often, I don't need the extreme performance of the M1 or the MiniLED HDR display. All I'm looking for to do with the iPad Pro is read scripts, make video thumbnails, use Sidecar for when traveling, and actually have a biometric that works with eczema. The rest of my uses will be pretty much content consumption from my sisters while on a road trip, testing iPadOS features as they continue to come out, and despite that, I'm not much of a gamer. Maybe play a game of chess or Minion Rush every once in a while. By the way, if anyone knows where I can find a good deal on a 3rd or 4th gen, I'm not looking for the 5th gen, but I don't want a 1st or 2nd. If anyone knows where I can find a good deal on a 3rd or 4th gen, please comment below. And no cellular options. I don't want cellular. Thanks for watching, and one more thing I have to announce is I am about to reach the 1-year mark of ownership with my iPhone XS Max. So be sure to check out that video once I get it uploaded. Do me a favor and interact with the stuff below. My name is Alpha DeWolf, and I'll see you next time.